Arad is located slightly east of Beersheba. Stone Age, followed by early Canaanite settlements, were discovered there dating back to 2650 BC, after which time it was apparently abandoned until the 11th century BC. Hello, good morning. We're with him. It was during this era in Israel's history, the time when the temple was built in Jerusalem, that another temple was apparently constructed here at Arad. This temple, very similar, though much smaller than the temple in Jerusalem, is shrouded in mystery and remains the only Judean temple discovered by archaeologists to date. But who exactly built it, and why? And add yet another layer of mystery, why would an Israelite temple be built here when there is express warning in Deuteronomy 12 to not offer sacrifices apart from the place of God's choosing, which during this era would have been Jerusalem? Excavations here have revealed an Iron Age fortress with a casemate wall 5 meters thick, protected by 2 towers, and a sanctuary that dates back to the time of King David and Solomon. The Arad temple was composed of 3 main rooms, a main entrance, a main hall, and the inner sanctum. 3 steps led up to the elevated inner sanctum, in which stood a 1-meter-high stone stela, painted red. 2 stone altars flanked both sides of the entrance. At the center of the courtyard in front of the temple was an altar built of uncut stone. Now, this whole structure, though smaller and with different proportions, is very similar to the temple in Jerusalem, which also had a 3-room layout and a similar size altar in the courtyard. From this vantage point, you can more easily see the temple's layout. The open courtyard in the foreground contained the large altar that seems to have been built to specifications found in Exodus, hence the uncut stones. An opening in the wall leads to the holy place, and facing this is the Holy of Holies. Now, there are no ancient documents that describe the worship at this site, but the 2 stone altars provide perhaps the best clues. Some scholars suggest that they are evidence of that cycle of idolatry that had existed from the Judges period, where the worship of Canaanite gods, such as the Asheroth, was alongside the worship of Yahweh. This combining of religious worship is called syncretism. You don't want to drop your keys down that. One of the most exciting discoveries that took place on Arad occurred in the 1960s, when a number of Hebrew pottery shards with ancient writing were unearthed. A pottery fragment with an ancient inscription is called an ostraca and is like an ancient letter that contains things like military correspondence, or even mundane things like tax receipts or even school exercises. The most famous of the ones discovered at Arad is called Ostraca 18, that refers to a religious shrine, saying, quote, "The house of Yahweh is well. It remains." Was this ancient letter referring to the temple here at Arad, or referring to the temple to Yahweh in Jerusalem? One thing is certainly clear from the Old Testament scriptures. The God of Israel had a zero-tolerance policy about his people mixing worship to him with worship to other gods. Deuteronomy 12 says, "When the Lord your God cuts off before you the nations whom you go in to dispossess, and you dispossess them and dwell in their land, take care that you be not ensnared to follow them after they have been destroyed before you, and that you do not inquire about their gods, saying, 'How do these nations serve their gods, that I also may do the same?' You shall not worship the Lord your God in that way. For every abominable thing that the Lord hates they have done for their gods, for they have even burned their sons and their daughters in the fire to their gods." Although some believe the Arad temple was also a temple to Yahweh, it was destroyed prior to these letters. And there is no evidence to suggest that it was a legitimate center of worship to Yahweh. It may have been an either unsanctioned temple to Yahweh or a pagan temple that had copied some of the forms of Solomon's temple. Either way, it was a violation of God's commands, and it demonstrated the religious syncretism that had troubled the Israelites.